Breaking news today on Sekulow as Republican George Santos expelled from Congress.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
So you heard the breaking news this morning, and people were not sure how the vote would come down, but the entire House has now decided to vote. You have to have a two-thirds majority to expel a New York Congressman, George Santos. Now, he is facing 23 counts of conspiracy, wire fraud, false statements, falsification of records, but he pled not guilty. The trial has not begun. Similar to the situation when you have Senator Menendez, you don't see a rush to vote him out with the Senate in such a small, Democrat majority. So now Republicans are down to 4 seats. I mean, so a couple of people get sick, a couple of people, can't make it on a flight, and suddenly you don't have the votes to pass things that you should be able to pass with a bare Republican vote. That's why the Republican leadership voted to keep Santos in, and there were a lot of Republicans making the case that, listen, if he's found guilty of what he's accused of, he should be removed from Congress, obviously, and we'll do that. But he should have his day in court. But there were enough Republicans, remember, these House Republicans are all up for re-election every 2 years, who felt like if they didn't vote to expel him, it was going to hurt their re-election chances, so they had to take this vote. Only a couple Democrats voted against expelling him, and so you had a vote. It was two-thirds majority. 311 to 114 wasn't even close.
No.
And he is gone.
You know, it's interesting because the commentary before the vote was that they thought that the momentum had actually shifted into Santos' favor. And they used the Senator Menendez situation where he's been charged federally with crimes by a grand jury in New Jersey. And they said, well, you've got the Menendez matter, now you've got the Santos matter. Neither one of them have been adjudicated. Right. So we'll wait till the adjudication. But it was just kind of a groundswell of opposition. The problem with this is politically is it, as Jordan said, it narrows down the number of votes so significantly that the margin is now 4.
Right. I mean, 4 in a Republican House, which is very, as you know, Dad, diverse. So we've got a conservative speaker right now.
Right.
Who is trying to stay in longer than, a
week.
McCarthy's right. On his way out, too.
By the way, he's saying he may leave in December.
Yeah. And
how do those seats do in an election?
Well,
when
here's
it's an
what happens
election?
for Santos. So in New York, the Democrat governor, Kathy Hochul, sets a special election to replace him. And the Republican Party chairman has been vetting candidates. And so I think it's within 10 days you set a special election. It's got to occur within 70 to 80 days. So you're going to have a special election. This was a district that Biden won by 8 and Santos won by 8. So Democrats have already been planning to take this district back. Likely they'd be able to get a temporary person in there during the special election, and then that person would be running almost like as an incumbent in November. Yep. So it could very well become a net loss for Republicans because of just all of this swirling around Santos. And I'm not sure.
This was not a smart move.
No. He was going to have his day in court, and at that point, most Republicans, if he was found guilty, were going to vote to remove him.
Yep.
But he was far away from that, and he was still a solid Republican vote on most issues, and still most Republicans and all Democrats voted to remove him.
Let me also say, for all of us at the American Center for Law and Justice, a huge thank you to our ACLJ members for your support in the month of November. We met our goal, which is great, and we exceeded our goal as it related to new ACLJ champions. These are people that donate each and every month. So we appreciate your support of the ACLJ. It's made a huge difference.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody out there who has been part of the ACLJ champions, those recurring donors. You can still do that, of course, this month as well, and you can sign up with an amount you're comfortable with donating each month. So today is the first day of the month, and you can say, I want to donate the first day of the month. You have $50 each day of that month. You go to aclj.org and check that box to become a recurring donor.
That's right, and this is our Faith and Freedom year end. So this officially starts the year. This is the biggest month of the year for the ACLJ. So any amount you donate, again, will be matched. But if you could do that recurring as well, become an ACLJ champion. Makes a huge difference. aclj.org.
Friday morning, the IDF resumed bombing in Gaza City after it announced Hamas began firing rockets into southern Israel, breaking the 7-day ceasefire.
Overnight, security alerts wailed over the south of Israel and communities close to Gaza. The army and the Israeli Prime Minister's office say the deal was also violated when Hamas did not release a minimum of 10 female hostages on Thursday in exchange for 30 prisoners, aid, and an extra day of truce.
During that week, more than 100 hostages were freed from Gaza. On Thursday, Hamas released 10 more Israeli hostages. Israel wanted to see all women and children set free. But as the fighting begins again, the negotiations are on hold.
About 140 hostages remain in Gaza, including 8 Americans. U.S. officials admit they know little about their condition.
Israel's goals for the war have not changed.
Nothing will stop us. We will continue this war until we achieve the 3 goals: to release all our abductees, to eliminate Hamas completely, and to ensure that Gaza will never again face such a threat.
The Israeli military says they've dropped leaflets in Gaza and shared an online map of designated civilian areas outside of the line of fire.
Those leaflets have a QR code that brings you to a map with Gaza broken up into very tiny parcels. It seems as if Israel will try to evacuate these parcels of civilians along established evacuation routes in an attempt to avoid civilian casualties as the fighting resumes.
They are not disagreeing over the concept that they need to still exchange hostages for prisoners. It broke down over how that is supposed to happen. So it is possible that this ceasefire could resume, but now the bombs are falling, the aid has stopped flowing. It is certainly a setback.
We'll see if possible and how long it might take to get to another point where there is another pause.
Back to Sekulow, our team pointed out, too, that while there is no one filling the Santos seat, the GOP has a 4-seat majority. But if the Democrats do win that special election, which is even before the election in November, if everything works out timing-wise, and we'll see if it does there, it could take the GOP majority down to 3.
Yeah, and then if Kevin McCarthy, there's all these discussions that Kevin McCarthy may leave during the Christmas break.
And then you got to go look at California and how that all works.
And that's kind of changed a bit, that district.
Yes.
Well, let's turn our attention to the situation in Israel because it is a very different situation today, and that is, and I've been dealing with our Israeli colleagues and lawyers all last night and this morning. The truce is over. The exchange of the hostages is over. There's a lot of thoughts about that. I want to give you a couple. The first priority of this enterprise, of course, you want the hostages back, but is the survival of the Jewish state. That's priority 1 here. And I think we have to be very clear that that is the priority that has to be met, is the survival of the Jewish state. So that's number 1. Number 2, or 1A, if you want to say, is the remaining hostages. Here's my concern. I've said this before. I will say it again. I am concerned that there's not the number of hostages, that 150 or 100, I guess be 140 number that they talk about left. I just don't see it because I think Hamas would have used that to at least get more chance for them to rearm themselves.
No, I want to remind people last night, it was not Israel who struck first. It was Hamas.
No,
so soon after the final hostages were released, they could not hit the number of 10.
No.
And which they've had difficulty with the last 2 days.
Right.
Remember, the ceasefire almost fell apart 24 hours ago. And I think we were predicting it on this broadcast yesterday, and you can never be certain, but we said, Israel could be back at war tonight, and it ended up that being the case. And what happened was a rocket was fired from Hamas into Israel, and Israel said, okay, enough. We're not
they were immediately ready to go.
Off.
The issue here, I will tell you, here's the legal dilemma, if you will, that Israel's in. So the International Criminal Court in The Hague has already dispatched, over the last week, its prosecutor to Israel and Gaza.
Yeah.
We're going to be dealing with them. We already are, actually. We filed some notices already. But the legal work that's going to entail in this is going to be vast, it's going to be significant, and it's going to be historic in scope. Because you're going to have a dual situation. As Israel continues to move aggressively militarily, you're going to have the loss of world opinion. That's what people are going to start forgetting what happened on October 7th, and it's going to be, I can't believe Israel's flattening Gaza. On the other hand, you're going to have the international pressure of referrals from the Palestinian Authority, maybe even from the UN itself, to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. There are a few lawyers in the United States of America that have been to The Hague. Two of them are on your set right now, okay? And here's the fact. The reality is that the legal lawfare aspect of this becomes just as significant as the military warfare.
Yeah, they want to drag Israel through. They want to make it difficult for companies.
Delegitimize it.
Right. Difficult for companies to do business in Israel. Difficult for Israeli businesses. You see some of them being hacked.
Yes.
In the U.S. By Islamic groups saying if you work with, Israeli companies, we feel like your businesses are now viable targets for hacking. And so they're already trying to delegitimize Israeli companies. And listen, what's most important for Israel is not how quick they can get tourists back to the Holy Land. That is important. But what's most important for Israel is how quick it can get back to a business as usual, which is not the same as the United States because they're always dealing with the threat of terror, but is certainly not a full-scale conflict like this. And I still am very concerned, and I've said it to Secretary Pompeo yesterday, and he agreed that we have not seen the end of combatants join this battle. I don't think it's Egypt, and I don't think it's not Jordan, and it's not Qatar.
No, it's the Houthis in Syria and Lebanon. It's the Hezbollah.
And the Hezbollah would be the big player.
And Hezbollah, and what people need to understand, I want you to understand this. So Hamas was very deadly, but Hezbollah takes it to an entire different dimension. I mean, it's an entire different dimension because of the lethality that they contain. Mm-hmm. So 10, 20 times, 100 times the number of rockets. Oh. Rockets that could go from the border of Lebanon right into the heart of Jerusalem. They've done this before. It not only takes out the north, we're talking about the Galilee region, we're talking about the Golan Heights. It could take out portions of Jerusalem. So this engagement has multiple risks. And I could already tell you that, and the government's not very stable right now. No. I mean, that's the other thing. Is the Israeli politics.
I want people to be clear on this. You're talking about the Israeli government.
Yeah, it's because they're coalition governments. Why don't we explain that? I think it's important.
Unlike here in the U.S., where we're used to one party kind of, winning out the day and then being in charge of all the executive branches, of course, you can deal with our version of divided government as if the legislature is different from the executive. And, of course, you've got an independent judiciary based on appointees for life. In Israel, no one's getting to the 51%. So you've got these interesting coalitions that come together. Sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes it don't really make sense on paper, Dad. And I mean, right now, it is one that was already not one of the most stable. And then with this attack, which was a failure of Israeli intelligence, I don't want to beat up on them too much right now because their focus right now is a war. But Israel will have to do its reckoning, too. I do think we're at Israel, I've said this multiple times, went too far. And the U.S., listen, we're a much bigger country and it's a little bit different, they are a democratic country, and people, can vote for who they want to vote for, and they use their legal system if they feel like their politicians have violated the law. But they got almost too divided.
Yes.
And I've heard that this has united Israelis, but we know that politics does not unite Israelis.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what is the concern here is
most of the time
you're going to have the hostage situation becomes even this much more difficult because as long as there's this kind of military engagement in Gaza, the risk to the hostages I have my theory that, as I've said before, that they just didn't have the number. I really believe that if Hamas had the numbers, they would have tried to carry this on for another 4 or 5 days.
Listen, we can't do 10, but we can do 8.
Right.
Then they would have come up with something.
Yeah, they didn't.
And they didn't. And that was really the last 2 days.
Yep.
They got a couple of high-profile ones. That one, the young girl who they put that horrible video out, hostage video out about. Ultimately, they were able to keep an extra day of ceasefire by releasing her. But that was it.
Yeah.
And again, you got Blinken making this comment, and it's already old news because – again, I don't know when it popped up on our phones. It was about midnight.
Yes, I was up.
Yeah, it was about midnight, 1 a.m.-ish when all of the news broke that the IDF, it wasn't just a rocket that hit Israel, but that Israel has now declared a conflict back on.
Yeah, I do a call at midnight, and that call, and we said yesterday that call's over.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
so they're in military engagement.
So I want to play Anthony Blinken because this is the pressure on Israel.
Oh, it's going to be
but they don't have the time. I mean, think about what he says in this comment and the fact that Israel had to decide to go back to war within 20 minutes last night of a rocket hitting.
I made clear that Before Israel resumes major military operations, it must put in place humanitarian civilian protection plans that minimize further casualties of innocent Palestinians. That means taking more effective steps to protect the lives of civilians, including by clearly and precisely designating areas and places in southern and central Gaza where they can be safe and out of the line of fire.
That was about 2 hours before Hamas launched a barrage of rockets against Israel the minute the ceasefire expired.
Yeah. It's like, so he's not living in reality, because we were saying on our broadcast at noon Eastern time yesterday, this could fall apart tonight. And it did. I mean, we weren't hoping that they would have to go back to war. We'd hoped that more hostages would get released. But he was already saying like they're going to have days to plan. They're not. This is not the United States.
No, and it's a different
kind of a country of 7 million surrounded by enemies.
Right.
Some who are more enemies than others, but all enemies who would like to see them abolished to some extent. You can't hold them to the standard of the U.S. military. Like, they're going to have days to plan and tell and that the Hamas is going to follow the rules of where the civilians should
go. Well, this
go.
is the ridiculous part of this idea that Hamas is going to play by the laws of armed conflict.
Right.
So that they don't use... let's talk about... here's what the ICC needs to be investigating, is that it's known now, it's undisputed, that Hamas terrorized and destroyed and killed at least 1,200, maybe 1,300 innocent Israeli civilians. That's a war crime. Number two, you want another war crime? Going in a hospital and using it as a base to destroy and send out your weapons. That's a war crime. Going into a school and sending out your weapons. That is also a war crime. So if the ICC prosecutor wants to get real here, this was initiated by Hamas, and the investigation should be going over Hamas. Israel is defending itself, and now will be, they did the ceasefire, and now it's going to be a full engagement.
Yes, and I do believe that there's a point, and I know it's difficult, and it's difficult because we represent families of these hostages. Yes. But there has to be a point, and we know this is the United States, and Israel knows this is a country too, where you have to survive, and you have to say, you know what, if our goal here is to eliminate Hamas, we can't have an endless ceasefire.
So let me tell you what we've done. We have we're in our year-end challenge now, and this is important. This is our Faith and Freedom year-end drive. We have mobilized our offices around the globe. Our office in Jerusalem, our offices in Strasbourg, France are very active right now. Washington, lawyers dispatched all over the world. Your support of the ACLJ keeps us in this fight. We are fighting for Western civilization right now, and your support is critical. So any amount you donate during this Faith and Freedom year-end drive is doubled. And if you can make that recurring, and so many of you have, you become an ACLJ champion, and that has a dramatic impact for us month after month after month. ACLJ.org.
What does it mean to be an ACLJ champion?
Becoming an ACLJ champion means joining us in the fight for liberty, in the fight for law, in the fight for peace, in the fight for freedom.
The battles being fought in courtrooms right now will decide what kind of future our kids will have tomorrow.
So when you join as an ACLJ champion, we now actually have a baseline to know what we can possibly accomplish. And look, the dream is vast.
Being a champion means that you get to come alongside churches who are being zoned out of properties, who are being forced to obtain liquor licenses simply to operate, coming alongside students who are being told they can't read their Bible in school or even bring it.
Becoming an ACLJ champion allows us to take on more cases internationally in places where Christian persecution is happening on a daily basis. The need for the defense of these Christians is overwhelming, and we can't do it without you.
Becoming an ACLJ champion means getting into a fight with deep state elites who are attacking our school children, who are attacking pro-life Christians.
We have lawyers right now winning in courtrooms across the world, but none of it would matter without the ACLJ champions. Simply put, we don't win unless ACLJ champions continue to step up.
We can't do what we do without you.
By becoming a monthly donor, you can become a champion of life.
A champion of liberty, a champion of freedom.
Please join us.
Please join us.
Please join us. Become an ACLJ champion today.
Welcome back to Sekulow. Of course, we've seen what's happening in the Middle East, but we've also seen the outrage happening on our college campuses and institutions here in the United States. And listen, there's always been in parts of the far left kind of this anti-Semitism that simmers, but for the most part, in the mainstream of the political world, of the business world, people would stay away from most forms of racism, including just object anti-Semitism. But we have seen at our nation's top universities some very bizarre moves in just the past couple of days. We didn't even get to it yesterday, but I don't want to miss it again today. So at Brown University, the president of Brown University prepared a speech, and it was a speech about a Palestinian student who was injured in a protest, but they were going to give a speech that was more inclusive, and they actually put the text of the speech up online. And the Brown president was supposed to say every student, faculty, and staff member at Brown should be able to proudly wear a Star of David or don a keffiyeh on the Brown campus, or to cover their head with a hijab or yarmulke. Listen to what she actually said when in front of her student body.
Let me tell you how I was going to end this, which was, I was going to say that at a faculty meeting last month, I said that every student, faculty, and staff member should be able to proudly don a keffiyeh on the Brown campus, or to cover their head with a hijab. And that Brown is a strong and loving community.
But not if you wear a Star of David or the yarmulke.
Which she totally admitted it.
Do you realize she was afraid? One,
she was afraid.
They are afraid. And when people like this is the head of universities, become afraid to talk to their own students, the students have taken over. That is again, that is an absurd situation. And the second point is this. This is when their donors, and this has happened to some institutions, have got to start saying, no more money from me unless you're out. And we've seen this in a couple of places already. Harry Hutchinson's joining us now. Harry, from this world of higher education, the hatred for Jews to the point where she knows that this speech was published online. So she knows she's going to get caught. And yet she did not want to say the word Star of David or yarmulke in front of that group of students because she thought they would, at least boo her, and at worst, maybe even start violence.
Absolutely. So the president of Brown University was clearly intimidated by the students. In other words, the residents of the insane asylum have taken over campuses in the United States, and they are part and parcel, I would argue, really, of a terror campaign which wishes to whitewash the terror that actually occurred on October the 7th, and the basic enjoyment of the slaughter which took place on October the 8th. And so I think if you look back in history, Jordan, the rise of on-campus Semitism among college students, faculty, and the administration has become a deeply disturbing phenomena that recalls the return of the Soviet Union's terror architect, Felix Dzerzhinsky, in Moscow. He built one of the world's most repressive political machines on earth in 1917. He argued that only a person with a cold head, a warm heart, and clean hands could become a security officer, or in the case of Brown University, the president of Brown University.
But Harry, why? You've been in the academy for a long time, for most of your career. Why is it that these presidents will not just say it, say the truth? And they want to protect the Muslim students on campus, that's fine. But you need to protect the Jewish students too. Why will they not say it?
Well, in part and parcel because over the last 60 to 80 years, there has been a concerted attempt to diminish the notion of truth, to diminish the notion of history. So if you look at the nation state of Israel, if you look at its historic connection to Palestine, which goes back thousands upon thousands of years, they want to ignore it. Why? Because they see a definitely different future for the rest of us, And this is ideological. It is grounded in Marxism. It is grounded in critical race theory. It's grounded in social justice notions. And these notions have basically infected first the administration, secondarily the faculty, and thirdly the students.
You know what I recommend the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs does? This is what I recommend. They send to every president of every university in the world the 45-minute video of what Hamas actually did, and have them watch it, as repulsive as it is, and then come out and say these kind of things that they're trying to say. Because I think the evidence, you hate to have to say we've gotten to this point where you have to show the evidence, but it's like you had to show the evidence of the Nazi atrocities before you could get the world to say, my gosh, they're gassing Jews in Germany.
Yeah. You have to show the bodies stacked on top of each other.
We're going to have to do the same thing. You'd think in 2023 you wouldn't have to do that, but in 2023, apparently we do. Well, so we got to show this disgusting, vile, horrid 47-minute video of unbelievable terror on kids, adults, grandparents, and horrible to these university presidents so they could have a little backbone and spine.
Yeah, and what's
which
also
they don't.
Bizarre to me is, they're supposed to be very...
That's, by the way, some of the Christian campuses are having these issues, too.
Yes, and listen, they're supposed to be very educated, and if they were, they would know that of all these places in the world, Israel is the only one that is a truly liberal society.
They're
That's
giving academic freedom? Yes.
True academic freedom, true religious freedom, true sexual freedom for women, for men, for gay individuals. I mean, it's a very progressive country. The
only progressive country in the region.
In the least progressive region of the world.
You see some of these videos.
No one gives them that credit.
Harry,
ever.
you see some of these videos these students are posting from these, the left-leaning groups, and they're saying these things about they're reading the Quran, and they're doing Hamas and Osama bin Laden. We had that. And you think to yourself, if they were there promulgating their position, which we allow in the United States of America because we are actually a free country,
yep.
If you did that in Gaza, they would throw you off the top of a building.
Absolutely. But instead, the university students, they're committed to the following fiction. They claim that Gaza is nothing less than an open-air prison, that the Israelis are openly massacring the Palestinians.
I have an idea. You hate practicing law live on the air. But you know what we need to do? A letter needs to go to every public and private university in the United States of America and explain to them what Title VI is and explain to them what the ramifications are. And we need to do that at the American Center for Law and Justice, and the ECLJ needs to do it in Europe, and our other offices around the world need to do it there too. But we need to start right here in the United States of America. A letter needs to go out saying, we're putting you on notice that we don't tolerate this in the United States of America. Okay? So I'm going to encourage you to go to aclj.org, support the ACLJ's efforts in our Faith and Freedom year-end drive. Two things we're trying to do here, folks. We're having to flow with the changing circumstances of world events that the ACLJ is engaged in. So we're working on the hostages. We're also working on the ICC matter. This is where you come in. Any amount you donate in our year-end drive is doubled. But if you can make that monthly, I think 250 or 260 yesterday did. That changes radically our ability to continue this fight. So we encourage you to do that.
We want you to do that at aclj.org. We get into the complexities. We beat back BDS. We're going to have to beat that back again.
Yep.
More on that when we get back, second half hour. We're at a moment in history we prayed we would never see again. We're experiencing global attacks on our faith and our freedom that we haven't seen in generations. What we are witnessing in Israel could be the precursor to a second Holocaust.
This was a full-scale land, sea, and air invasion. Policies have consequences, and look in the world we're in. Russia's fighting with Ukraine. China about to invade Taiwan. The Middle East imploding.
Here at the ACLJ, we are uniquely positioned to meet these evil attacks head on. We've assembled an elite legal team in our offices here, in Jerusalem, and around the globe, all thanks to you, our donors. In order to meet legal demands of historical proportions, today we are launching our Faith and Freedom Drive. Your gifts will be doubled, dollar for dollar. We need you now more than ever. The country needs you, the world needs you, and Israel needs you. Have your gift doubled through the ACLJ's Faith and Freedom Drive today. Go to aclj.org.
keeping you informed and engaged. Now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
Welcome back to Sekulow. There is news happening, of course, in the world, and one thing that's happening in the United States, the death of former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who my dad's got to appear before. Was many times, and again, she being the first woman appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, not always getting the same attention as Justice Ginsburg.
But she was the original.
But yes, the original. But I think because she leaned more conservative. It certainly wasn't right wing by any of the standards of today, but of her time, was part of the Republican Party.
Well, I mean,
like
if you look
Western
at the
movement,
Bush versus Gore,
yes,
the election case, she voted with the conservatives. My very first case, Board of Airport Commissioners versus Jews for Jesus. She was the author of the opinion. She was the main questioner. Her and Justice Scalia. She wrote the opinion in the Mergens case, which allowed for the Bible studies and Bible clubs to operate on every public school campus in the United States. She was very good on the religion clauses, very good on free speech. Let me give you a sample. This is a long time ago, folks. This was in March 3rd of 1987. Board of Airport Commissioners versus Jews for Jesus.
Mr. Sekulow, suppose we disagree with the court below and think that this is not a traditional public forum. Did you argue below that in any event under the California Constitution it would be a public forum and must be open?
Yes, Your Honor. In the district court, arguments regarding the California law on the liberty of free speech was argued extensively.
But the courts below never reached the state law question.
That's correct, Your Honor. They dealt with it on
And if we decided the federal constitutional issue here against you, would it be your position that the state law might nevertheless require it to be opened?
Our position would be that In re Hoffman, as Your Honor cited earlier, would stand for the proposition that First Amendment activities would be appropriate. However, we would also assert that under the federal Constitution, of course, these activities.
Suppose we decide against you on the federal Constitution. I'm trying to inquire whether you think it then is still open to you and your client to raise the state constitutional.
Yes, Your Honor, we would take the position it has. We've not limited.
Why then shouldn't the court below have decided the state issue first?
We've pointed that out in our brief. Inexplicably, there is nothing in the district court's opinion here, U.S. District Court's opinion, regarding the California Constitution. It was argued. It was in the briefs. It was not. The opinion did not contain any response to it.
She ruled 9-0 in our favor, finding that the free speech could take place under the U.S. Constitution and that the ordinance at the Los Angeles airport was overbroad. And that overbreadth opinion we've used, I can't even countless times in our work. Listen, she was a tough questioner, but a lot of our cases, she was the main architect of the opinion.
Yeah. And so, like you said, on this first moment of religious freedom and religious liberty, when it came under attack, and this was the 60s, 70s, and you started fighting back in that, what was it, 87? I was 5 at that time. So just to give people perspective on that. And then you think about it again. These kind of, it's not circular. It's not exactly the same because you fight for robust free speech, but there's always this movement in the United States to say. To favor some speech over others.
Yeah. She did not. She favored, if it was either constitutional or wasn't, but this was, Will Haynes pointed this out, this was a historic court.
Yeah.
You had John Brennan, you had Thurgood Marshall, Antonin Scalia,
first woman,
William Rehnquist, a Kennedy appointment, Byron White was on this court, a Ford appointment, John Paul Stevens was on this court, Harry Blackmun served on this court. This was a historic court, and I had the privilege of arguing before Justice O'Connor, our thoughts and prayers with her family. She served our country well. She served her country honorably, and she was a groundbreaker in the legal profession.
Rick Riddell is part of our team. He's going to be joining us the next segment of the broadcast. And again, also, to have people like Rick Riddell as part of our team is because of your financial support of the ACLJ. So we thank you for what you did last month during this Faith and Freedom Drive, and what you can do this month as well, and your recurring donors as well. The ACLJ champions has really just transformed the abilities of the ACLJ to take action in just really the past couple of months because of your ability to make those recurring donations. To check that box, go to aclj.org. We'll be back with Rick Riddell.
the European Center for Law and Justice. You have 10 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honors, and may it please the Chamber. As early as 2002, the United States Congress passed explicit legislation with wide bipartisan support, the American Service Members Protection Act, codifying into law that it will not participate under Section 7423B of the Act, and I will quote, no United States court and no agency or entity of state or local government, including any court, may cooperate with the International Criminal Court in response to a request for cooperation submitted by the International Criminal Court pursuant to the Rome Statute. There is no room to speculate that this will suddenly change. This court's jurisdiction is based on the delegation of authority by state parties. However, there is no customary norm whereby states can delegate their criminal jurisdiction over foreign nationals to a third party. In fact, the customary norm is just the opposite. A state cannot delegate that jurisdiction to another state without the consent of the accused states of nationality. A state also cannot delegate its criminal jurisdiction over foreign nationals to a tribunal whose jurisdiction has been rejected by the accused person's state of nationality. It is not in the interest of justice to ignore customary international norms. It is not in the interest of justice to override explicit agreements between sovereign states. And it is not in the interest of justice to waste the court's resources while ignoring the reality of principled non-cooperation.
Welcome back to Sekulow. You know, we played that bite for you from Anthony Blinken. That was a couple of hours into what he knew was going to be a question about whether or not there would be another day of a truce between a sort of ceasefire between Israel and Hamas for another exchange of hostages. And he also knew, like we all did, because this becomes public every evening, that it was becoming more and more difficult for Hamas to meet the numbers they would even agree to. So they would have their negotiators in Qatar agree to this number of 10. They try to do 7 plus 3 dead bodies, and they couldn't find 10 people, and then they'd have to find 3 more people, and it just got more and more difficult. And then we saw terror attacks in Jerusalem, and then we saw rocket fire come out of Gaza into Jerusalem, and that's when the Israelis said enough with the ceasefire for now. And remember, and I'll go to Rick on this right away. Rick, there were not any hostages released until the IDF went to war in Gaza. And then there was this momentary ceasefire where about half the hostages have been returned, a little bit less than half. But there were none released before that. So people who are critical of Israel saying, well, now that they've gone back to conflict, there won't ever be any more hostages released. One, we don't know if there's any more living hostages. But two, we also know that Hamas only responds to force.
Look, I think most people who are listening to us right now are just thinking, how in the world is this weakness perpetuating itself every single day? Why are we in this problem every single day? And I think the answer is we don't have any negotiation leverage. We gave it all up when we gave Iran money, when we gave them credit, when we lifted the sanctions. And the Iranians know this. They know that when they're dealing with Joe Biden, he doesn't have any power left. And so, honestly, we're on the sidelines. The United States government is on the sidelines waiting for Hamas to give us something like our hostages back. We are in a terrible position. We don't have any leverage. And Joe Biden himself is saying publicly, like, I'm waiting. I don't know. We're not sure. We're waiting. We're literally waiting on Hamas. Think about that.
You know, this is what I don't understand, Rick. 1 U.S. hostage was released. I think that was the number, right? 1? Was it maybe 2? I think 1 U.S. hostage was released. The Hamas could have cared less. They didn't even respond to it. Any of the overtures from the White House or the State Department.
Yeah, the spin is that there are 4 that were released because some of them were dual citizens.
Yeah.
And so there's a debate on whether or not it's 2 or 4. But look, we know that there are at least 10 more Americans that are held hostage. Anthony Blinken is absolutely looking like a disaster, a weak Secretary of State. Jake Sullivan is not being asked. But again, we talk about this all the time. The reason why this weakness perpetuates itself, not only because we're in a terrible negotiating position, but because our media doesn't hold this White House to account. They are getting away with it. They're getting away with being weak. And, we're all suffering because the reality is the price for an American head has gone up under this administration. We know that.
I want to play Blinken for you, Rick, and I want to get your response to this because this is how he said, if Israel does have to go back to conflict and listen with Hamas, Hamas wasn't going to operate their way, but Israel can't go to that level. To take a listen.
The way Israel defends itself matters. It's imperative that Israel act in accordance with international humanitarian law and the laws of war, even when confronting a terrorist group that respects neither.
Yeah, I want to ask this, Rick, just outright.
Who makes a statement like that?
Yeah,
First of all, Israel does follow international law, and I've defended them at the International Criminal Court.
We also know because you defended the United States.
I've also defended the United States at the International Criminal Court.
The International Criminal Court does not believe the United States military followed international law.
That's correct.
In Afghanistan or Iraq.
They did not believe that, and then the prosecutor
wisely... But did the United
wisely...
States military care?
Yeah, no, they did not. And the Israel... And by the way, neither Israel or the United States are members of that court. I appeared putting forward the position of the United States. And you know what? It almost didn't matter what the court said because at the end of the day, the prosecutor said, forget this. We can't try this, which is what's going to happen in the Israel thing, too. But, Rick, it's just what his statement is so ridiculous. Pegging Israel as a violator of international law.
My 83-year-old mother could be a better Secretary of State than this guy. Honestly, she's so clear-eyed about what's happening. She says to me, I don't see any other country in this entire region following the Geneva Convention unless it's Israel. To have the Secretary of State somehow lecturing Israel right now is so offensive and so stupid, to be honest, because there is one country in this region that follows all of the rules and has a check and a balance on its system, and it has a free media, and that's Israel. We don't need to be lecturing Israel on what to do after a terrorist attack like what they have seen. I actually think the United States should have one answer, which is we support Israel and we're not going to tell them how to respond to a terrorist attack. That's what we should be doing.
Let's go to Gary in Maine on line 1. Hey, Gary, welcome to Sekulow. You're on the air with Rick.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say thank you to you and your organization, because in the infancy of your organization, I was living in Colorado, a rural town. My daughter was attending high school, and the new principal tried to get rid of the Bible club in high school. And so another father and I called your organization. You gave us the tools to fight that, and we won.
That's great. That was an opinion, by the way, by the late Justice O'Connor. But we appreciate that, Gary. Go ahead.
All right. Second of all, you mentioned a video that's available that Israeli is sending out to college campuses. I am an Army veteran, and I asked a young man who answered the phone, is that available to the public?
No, it's not even available to. It's not even available to the universities. They haven't sent it out yet at all. They've really, Rick. They've kept this very tight. They've let some members of Congress have seen it. Some of the lawyers have seen it, obviously, but it has not been widely distributed. It's horrid. I need to say this. Yeah. It's horrible to watch this. Hamas recorded their atrocities in real time. But what I'm saying is to these university professors and these university presidents who have no backbone or spine, I think the Israeli government Ministry of Foreign Affairs should get it to them and let them see. You know, Rick, you dealt with this. You were an ambassador. You were director of national intelligence. You worked at the UN. You have got to point to sometimes, because when the world is against you like this, point to the atrocity of actually what happened. It took the United States seeing what the Nazis actually did before the United States engaged. That's the truth.
I would say it's why we have Holocaust museums around the world, in the United States and Israel, but around the world, that walk you through what it was like. And we even take children to these museums to say how bad this was, so that this never happens again. And that video, I've talked to members of Congress who have seen it, who literally could not. There are people passed out. People who are on foreign affairs committees and have seen a lot of tough videos of even our troops in harm's way and in tough situations. People being physically ill. But
that's what actually happened.
That had to happen for the Holocaust, too.
You know, the UN should be, everybody in the UN, every ambassador should be, required to watch this before they make the ridiculous statements they make from the green podium.
Yeah, look, this is all about educating yourself. And one of the things that I have always tried to do is to force myself into looking at the truth. And sometimes it's horrid. I've seen some of these videos from Hamas. It is incredibly hard to watch. Yeah. It doesn't even feel like there's a human being that is able to do these things.
It is demonic. There is, and if there is something over demonic that's like higher than demonic, that's what this is. But go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
There is no question that something has taken over these people, because it is so beyond what you can comprehend, and therefore it's shocking to you to be witnessing it, and it's hard to take. I have forced myself to do it for one reason, and that's because as a former U.S. official with a voice on these issues, I think it's incredibly important to give context and to know what you're dealing with. You've got to look at the enemy. You've got to know exactly what you're dealing with. You have to be clear-eyed. There's a responsibility to be able to know what is happening and how to respond to it. And for me, that doesn't mean just reading about it or hearing about it from someone else. I want to see the evidence for myself so that when I go in to make decisions about my opinion publicly, or as a former official, I did this when I was in government. You want to be able to have a clear-eyed, and it takes some guts to be able to do it.
I think at some point the world may have to see it. I mean, I again, if you want it, because at some point there was a decision made to show images of the Holocaust, not just to the troops who showed up, but to all of us, and in a way that almost is on a fairly regular basis to say, let's not have this happen again to any group.
It did happen again to the same group.
Yeah.
Never again was October 7th. That's the tragedy of all this. Thank you, Rick. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
What does it mean to be an ACLJ champion?
Becoming an ACLJ champion means joining us in the fight for liberty, in the fight for law, in the fight for peace, in the fight for freedom.
The battles being fought in courtrooms right now will decide what kind of future our kids will have tomorrow.
So when you join as an ACLJ champion, we now actually have a baseline to know what we can possibly accomplish. And look, the dream is vast.
Being a champion means that you get to come alongside churches who are being zoned out of properties, who are being forced to obtain liquor licenses simply to operate, coming alongside students who are being told they can't read their Bible in school or even bring it.
Becoming an ACLJ champion allows us to take on more cases internationally. In places where Christian persecution is happening on a daily basis. The need for the defense of these Christians is overwhelming, and we can't do it without you.
Becoming an ACLJ champion means getting into a fight with deep state elites who are attacking our school children, who are attacking pro-life Christians.
We have lawyers right now winning in courtrooms across the world, but none of it would matter without the ACLJ champions. Simply put, we don't win unless ACLJ champions continue to step up.
We can't do what we do without you.
By becoming a monthly donor, you can become a champion of life.
A champion of liberty, a champion of freedom.
Please join us.
Please join us.
Please join us. Become an ACLJ champion today.
and Gavin Newsom, and it was moderated by our good friend Sean Hannity,
who did a great job.
One, I think, actually tweeted this out after the debate. The best part about it was Sean showed that you can have one moderator who can come from very, very specific, like, part of the political spectrum, but treat the other side equally as fairly, giving them their opportunities, not just unfairly attacking them or asking them unfair questions, and make it a discussion worth watching. He was, Sean, he's tough enough to jump in and tell them both to be quiet when they got like too fake. When they start like listing off their predetermined lines.
Yeah, leaving the answers.
But having people like Sean, that's the difference between Caitlin Collins going up against Donald Trump and Sean Hannity interviewing Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I think what you saw last night, Gavin Newsom says neither are going to be president. He's probably correct. This election cycle, Gavin Newsom definitely wants to be president one day, and Ron DeSantis is still in this race.
Yeah, and I think he could be. I mean, he's not someone that he may be able to stick around and come back and do this again in a number of years. I mean, clearly, right?
Very young.
Yeah, he's very young. I mean, he's early 40s.
It's the relevancy of how quick we.
How do you think the debate went?
Overall, I thought it was good. I thought it was by far the best debate I've seen in years. I think it was refreshing to see two people on a stage, also and not 20. And like you said, especially even opposing each other, having some form of respect and talking to each other, even when blaming each other for pretty aggressive you'd say crimes against humanity, if you will, some of the blames that were being thrown around. Overall, I thought Newsom, he's really slick, incredibly slick, would get around answering questions, maybe slicker than anyone I've ever seen in the terms of he would answer without answering over and over again.
Yep.
And then DeSantis, I feel like maybe a little bit more flappable, but had great answers. Unfortunately, these two guys aren't going to be the nominees. I think that's pretty obvious and pretty clear.
I think they could be facing off in 2028.
Maybe, but that's a long time in politics.
It is.
And what's interesting is, I think when you see Newsom, I think for conservatives, because again, look, there weren't 20 liberals on the stage, you get to see a very clear California liberal. How do they get elected? What do they believe? You're not going to turn them into a Republican.
No.
They believe that their tax rates are the smart way to do taxes.
Yeah, they believe they're right.
Yes, they do believe they're right. And they believe that on the other side is wrong, and they're going to stick with it and say, listen, I'm the governor of the biggest state in the country.
Do you think the way it was set up, I thought the whole setup was great.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought it was well lit, well shot. It looked good.
I like the no audience.
It was calm. I think the no audience was smart, as much as I didn't like it thought I wouldn't like it from a entertainment point of view. I actually found myself more engaged in the 2 hours of watching an hour and a half that was on. And I did find it just to be an engaging experience. I look forward to seeing what the ratings are if anyone tuned in for it. I think with Sean being in his normal spot, you're always going to have millions of people that watch, but will it go above and beyond? I think probably will. But it also showed, kind of where we are in society. But I thought it was unique. It was a fun spectacle to have the two of them go at it. And as you said, I do believe that those two guys, whether you like him or hate him, they believe in what they're saying.
And they both said that about each other. They did.
And that's good. I think that's good for humanity, at least, to have some people out there. I fundamentally disagree with Gavin Newsom on pretty much everything. But at least it was done well. I mean, I think this also comes at a time where you have, even people like Chris Cuomo and those people now saying, well, maybe I'm going to vote for Trump.
I saw that yesterday.
So when that starts happening, he didn't say I'm going to, but I think a lot of them, I haven't met anyone who's really excited about voting for Biden. So I think to have two fresh faces up on stage was
nice.
sort of what we all kind of hoped would have happened this time in some ways. Before Trump got in, was that you'd have some younger, fresher people up there talking.
Neither party has that option.
No. And I think that's a bit of going, oh, well, yeah, maybe we're looking towards the future. But when you have a lot of prominent, what you'd say, I guess, old school Democrats now saying, I'm not voting for Biden, it's pretty shocking.
Can we pivot? It's December 1st.
It's December 1st.
It's a Friday.
Yep.
It is a Friday.
People need a break.
And Lord knows people need a break.
Everybody
There's nothing
needs a break.
wrong with that.
No.
Taking those mental breaks.
No.
We weren't supposed to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. We wouldn't, until the last 25, 30 years, we didn't even know what was happening around the world until the nightly news. You got to think about that. Most people didn't know what was happening in real time. There was no X platform. There was none of these other ways to get in touch. So we decided to kind of throw that back. We made a brand new Christmas movie. It is called Jingle Smells. It is a Christmas comedy, but a lot of heart and a lot of messages also. Important messages for today. And specifically messages that you and your family can get behind. It stars John Schneider, as well as an amazing cast of characters, including all of us that are on it. You've heard me talk about it for the last week it's been out. We've been doing record numbers. Things are doing really well. We're getting great reviews. And
it's a great movie.
I appreciate it. I think it is a great movie. It's really fun, and it's available right now on demand at jinglesmells.movie through our premier platform of Rumble, which is the number 1 free speech platform, and that's where you can get it.
What's the price?
It is $19.99. It is $20. You own it.
It's not just a one-time view.
Yeah, you can watch it it's a stream, but you can watch it as many times as you want.
You can log into your different Rumble accounts, and if you're at this TV and you go into another room.
Yeah, of course. If you just log in on your Rumble account, it's available.
Most TVs within the last 3 years have got Rumble.
That's
right. At least if you search.
Yeah, if you search in your app store, you're going to find it, and it's available there. You make the purchase.
Found it easy.
Yeah, it's easy. Just go to jinglesmells.movie. There's a big button that says order here, and you can buy it. Again, it's got a great cast. It is about
Sean Hannity's in it.
It's about cancel culture, but in a way that's very silly and satirical, but also has a lot of heart and message in it. We may have the trailer. Do we have the trailer or any? Yeah, we can watch the trailer.
I really stretched. I went for a stretch. I play mayor.
Jordan plays the mayor.
Suit and tie mayor.
You're the drummer in the band, the Jay Sekulow band. If you watched it last night, make an appearance in it. I play a prisoner, so that's good.
Yours was this more of a stretch.
Yeah, mine. I don't have any lines.
Do people notice because it's the very beginning and do the.
Yeah, look for me in the very first scene. But there's also a lot of our friends show up throughout it.
I think you're grunting.
I'm grunting. I'm throwing a guy up against the wall, which was super fun to do.
We had 100,000 people watch on Rumble last night total.
That's great.
The
concert. That's
and
great.
And then we played the.
And for Jingle Smells, that means well over 1 million people. We have 900,000 plus views on the Jingle Smells page right now. Awesome. That includes the trailer and everything, which is awesome. That means people are reacting.
Message too.
As a message, look, we're trying to send a message. We're trying to send a message to Hollywood. We want this to be the #1 Christmas movie of the year, and we could do that with you and your support. And by the way, a huge percentage of the movie funds that come from the movie goes to the ACLJ.
It's another way to help the ACLJ. So let's go ahead and watch the
trailer.
Listen to the trailer.
You know, it's very hard to find a place that even comes close to being worthy of your beauty.
It's romantic.
It's about you and me alone.
Wow, look at the two of you.
Merry Christmas, America. Hollywood has canceled Mason Stone.
Stone will be digitally replaced by AI. Boycott Stone!
We will no longer be manufacturing Mason Stone characters.
Get them all out of here by Christmas Eve.
You gotta be kidding me.
How'd you get it? Oh, fell off the truck.
There was a truck involved.
The mysterious gift giver has struck again.
You get busted with those toys, you're done. And you made me an accessory.
Well, you know what they say. Some accessories are required.
Am I smiling?
No.
Jingle smells, stinking all the way.
They called me Jingle Smells.
Yeah, I know.
It is available right now on the Rumble platform. It is available to stream on demand again on Rumble, but directly. The easiest way is jinglesmells.movie. We had John Schneider on last week. Some people have asked about other options. That's going to come. Maybe DVDs will be coming next week. You'll be able to get other options.
He's going to have DVDs
but
out.
Stream it tonight with your family.
Great
get everyone around.
To do it.
It's completely clean. I want to make sure people know that too. I know there's a lot of conservatives who are making a lot of comedies this weekend. You know what? God bless them. Love them. But those aren't movies you're going to sit around and watch with your kids. This you can. And I'll make sure that that's clear. This isn't an adult comedy. This is a family comedy in the style of Christmas comedies we grew up with.
If you got younger kids who are maybe not following this one, you don't have to worry about them being in the room.
And John Schneider's in it. Eric Roberts. You got SNL's Victoria Jackson and Jim Brewer, who's going to be on our broadcast next week. Brad Stein, Christian comedian. Ben Davies is our lead. You know him from The Daily Wire, as well as from Courageous and War Room. So a lot of heavy hitters in this movie.
Sean Hannity.
And, of course, Sean Hannity, our friend Sean Hannity. And all of us are in it. Mike Huckabee makes a vocal appearance. Keep an ear out. Tell me if you can figure out what character, before you get to the credits, Mike Huckabee plays. It's pretty surprising. You can find it again on Jingle Smells. Jinglesmells.movie.